261st District Court is back in session.
All right, you may proceed. You're on mute, Ms. Dickey.
I know, I figured that out. I'm a little slow. Mr. Weishart, would you put Exhibit 605 on the screen, please?
This one is marked confidential on my list. It's fine with me if you all have decided it's okay to display, but on my list, it's marked confidential.
No, we'd like it to not be displayed.
All right.
I think it's already been displayed, hasn't it?
I don't remember that, but I do see that it's marked. I just wanted to make sure. That's fine.
Well, it's Sailor confidential, so if Mr. Soltero has a problem with it being on the screen, I bet he'll let us know.
It's our information that was produced through him, and so it's designated confidential, and we stand on that.
Well, okay, so does that mean you don't want it on the screen?
Yes, we don't want it on the screen.
Okay, sorry, I was not hearing that clearly. Mr. Floriani, you have a copy of 605.
Okay. The thing that was just put on the screen, I remember it. I don't know if I have a copy of it, but I can go off memory. I know what that is.
Okay, well, that's a little scary that you've memorized the exhibit numbers. But...
No, I just saw what was on the screen. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so this is a communication from Mr. Saylor to you, talking about Billy Schaefer.
Okay.
Who's Billy Schaefer?
I think he's he does some content in Ohio.
Okay, and it says that Flo tried to get them and couldn't. Did you ever contact Billy Schaefer?
I don't remember contacting him. I don't think so.
Okay, so 606, is that in the same category, Ms. Burgess, that you don't want that in the on the screen? My memory is we showed it before. It's the
No, it hasn't been shown. It's same category.
Easy Live targets.
That's right.
Do you have that exhibit memorized, Mr. Floriani?
I do.
Okay. The Easy Live targets were Wyoming Seminary. Why was that an Easy Live target, and would you ever be interested in them?
I'm sorry, we object to the dissemination of the information contained in the confidential document as well as the confidential document being shown. If you just read it, it's got the same impact.
All right, so I'm confused. Do we need to go into the closed courtroom? Here's the deal. The whole point of the flow chart and all that was if you had difficulty with some of these documents that you did not want to be on live stream, you need to tell me that so that I can make arrangements to put us into the closed courtroom to discuss them. So I'm sort of just confused about what.
My fault, Your Honor. I will do it in such a way that we don't have to go off the screen.
Okay, very good.
And I've got
Floriani, it's okay. She's going to ask you another question.
But before I go forward, Ms. Burgess, the part that you object is me referencing the people that were Easy Live targets. Is that correct? Right. Okay. So if I talk about it generically, you're okay with that?
Your Honor, the documents have been emailed to Mr. Floriani.
Thank you. Ms. Burgess, are you okay if she just generally describes without naming names?
Yes, right, yes.
Okay, very good.
Mr. Floriani, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 Easy Live targets on this list. Are you familiar generally with what those were?
I generally know, the names.
Okay. And did you respond to this email from Mr. Saylor that he sent on November 8th, 2019 in writing?
Nope.
Did you respond to it verbally?
Yes, I called him after getting this.
Okay, and do not tell me what Mr. Saylor said, please. Only tell me what you said to Mr. Saylor. Can you tell us what you said to Mr. Saylor about this email?
I told Mr. Saylor he should not produce any live events. He should not go out and acquire any live events. I thought that was too close to his PIIA. I just told him, dude, it's too much. Do not do it.
Was this after how long after he joined Flow Sports was this?
This is after he joined. That's after he started his channel on Rockfin, and this was a couple of days after.
Did you have to explain many aspects of Rockfin's business model to him at the inception or not?
Objection leading.
Dave?
Did you discuss Rockfin's business model with Mr. Saylor?
Yes. So I had to explain to him that, I mean, he has things on this list that don't even make any sense, which clearly means he does not understand what Rockfin was and is. And I called him and explained those things to him as well.
Mr. Floriani, are you aware of any instances where Mr. Saylor used misappropriated trade secrets from Flow Sports on his Mat Scouts channel?
Objection
None.
leading.
He's answered that question. Let's move on.
Does Rockfin publish any of Mr. Saylor's content?
No, Mat Scouts does.
Okay. Are there live events on Rockfin?
Channels distribute live events through the Rockfin platform. Yes.
And do you own those live events?
No. Nope.
Do you have rights to those live events?
Nope.
What content creators have streamed live events on the Rockfin platform?
Live events are pretty big in the free thinking media vertical. And then, so there's a whole host of liberal, mostly, I'd characterize as mostly left-wing populist type of political folks that stream pretty consistently, some independent, maybe someone consider right-wing, that stream, and they do so almost daily. In terms of sporting events, there's been about a handful.
Okay, so who are the content creators that have streamed live wrestling events?
PA Power, IA Wrestle, NLWC. I believe that's it. There might be one more, but I think that's it.
Okay, for the record, NLWC is Nittany. Not sure I've got that right yet.
Lion, singular, Nittany Lion Wrestling Club.
Okay, so did you pursue the NLWC event?
No.
Okay, how did you come to know that NLWC had any interest at all?
Kale, talked to Kale. Kale called me and he was just inquiring about the Rockfin platform.
At the time that was going on, were you aware that they had contacted Mr. Saylor?
No, I had no idea.
When did you become aware that NLWC contacted Mr. Saylor?
Sometime through this lawsuit.
Okay, and when you got a call from Cale Sanderson, what did you tell him about Rockfin?
Well, I told him it would be really hard to execute a live event. I actually told him he might want to consider just doing it with Flow or with Fight TV because the actual execution of a live event and producing it is really hard. The matchmaking is cumbersome, it's long, it's iterative, it's detailed, and he's got a full-time job. So I really pressed into his desire to actually execute a live event and told him that he might want to actually go with Flow Sports because to produce it is difficult.
What was when you eventually moved forward with NLWC, what were the terms of the compensation that they would receive?
I had no terms. He was just another channel on the platform.
And so if he's just another channel on the platform, how's that governed?
Just through our TOS, terms of service.
What would he get and what would Rockfin get?
So on a daily mint, the Rockfin gets 28% of the mints, or 28% of the value of the mints that occur on the platform, and the creators get 72% of the value that they've contributed. It's not that easy. It ends up, our take actually ends up being between 10 and 20% because of some other technical aspects that I won't get into. But essentially our take is between 10 and 20%. Typically, it can be as high as 28, but it really isn't. It's between 10 and 20%, and the platform receives the rest.
So what did Mr. Sanderson decide to do?
They decided to move forward, go into business for themselves, and create a channel, NLWC channel, and take a chance and put on a live event.
Did you offer him any guaranteed payment?
None.
Any bonus?
None.
Okay. And are they exclusive to Rockfin?
They can do whatever they want. I mean, they could have gone to a different platform the day of the event, and Rockfin wouldn't have anything to say about it because we don't control their IP. They control their IP, and still to this day, that's what governs the relationship.
Did Willie Saylor have any involvement in negotiating the deal with the Nittany Lions Wrestling Club?
Objection leading.
Overruled. You can answer that one if you know the answer.
Well, I would disagree that characterize that we negotiated with the NLWC. We didn't negotiate anything. It's just our terms of service, and Willie Saylor had nothing to do with it.
When NLWC decided to have a channel on Rockfin, who, in your view, who were they competing with, if anyone at all?
I mean, in that sense, they would, if they're starting their own little media enterprise, they're competing with Flow Sports. They're competing with other media companies in the space. People who are creating content, that's who they would be competing with.
We heard earlier your answer about what Mr. Saylor does at Rockfin that he didn't do at Flow Sports. Tell the court, if you would, what he did at Flow Sports that he does not do at Rockfin.
Well, he was a managing editor at Flow Sports. He helped produce events at Flow Sports. He helped execute live events. He would actually go out and stream live events from occasion. He gives, obviously, his opinion very freely. So that is, hopefully I'm not missing anything, but I think that's just that comes to my mind of a different, I mean, oh, he's MC events. He was actively involved in participating actually with the talent at events. So those things, I would say.
And is he doing those things on Mat Scouts and streaming them on the Rockfin platform?
No.
In 2018, as CEO of Flow Sports, did you consider Facebook a competitor of Flow Sports?
Yes.
And why?
Because they were actively getting into purchasing live event rights in sports. I mean, they had made a big deal that they were going into that area. Since that time, they've withdrawn, but there was numerous articles, and it was the buzz around the media industry that Facebook was getting into actually purchasing live event rights. And so as a CEO of a media company, that they could be doing that with also a sophisticated competitor like Flow Sports, I was very much on my toes and did consider them to be a competitor, because if I didn't, we could get caught. So I believe they even bid on rights. I don't necessarily know if they got them, but there was a lot of talk of Facebook getting into live sporting event rights.
So did you do fundraising as CEO of Flow Sports?
I raised, I think, around $45 million worth of capital combined of venture capital and debt.
And there was a Series B of investment round. Is that correct?
Yeah, we did a Series B round where myself and Pat Noonan went around the country and talked to basically 100 VCs. I don't know if it was 100, but it was up there.
And as part of your fundraising effort with venture capitalists, do you have to be clear about who your competitors are?
Yes,
I'm going to object. This is irrelevant. It's before Rockfin even existed.
If there are no claims during this period of time, I would agree.
Your Honor, I think it may be relevant because it's the time of the PIA.
Can I respond, Your Honor?
Well, let me get some clarification for the objection. What's the legal objection? Relevance as to questions about before Rockfin was created?
That's right. And this is even
Hold on.
after.
Hold
Yes.
on. Hold on. Just try to answer that question for clarification. So, Mr. Sotero, I heard your voice first. What does before Rockfin existed have to do with anything that's involved in this lawsuit?
For one thing, it could have something to do with how the PIA is to be interpreted based on what a competitor was.
I don't see that, but I understand what you're saying. Ms. Dickey?
It's, I think, important, Your Honor, for you to understand what business he was saying at that time and raising these millions and millions of dollars that Flow Sports was in, because we have a controversy about what sports video industry means and what the PIA stood for, and whether they're competitors one way or the other. And if he's out raising tens of millions of dollars and making pitches to investors and talking about what Flow Sports does, I think that's important.
He can't tell me some of that. He can tell me some of that. The objection is to relevance. And so is there something more than what you've already developed in your testimony that will shed light on this? He's already said he didn't think they were competitors. He's already said he didn't understand that term to mean what Ms. Burgess's client thinks it means. He's already said that what he's told us about Rothkin's current business model and how he was using different ways to describe it to investors over time. Semantically, that turned out to change from time to time as they better understood their model and their audience. I mean, I feel like I've heard it, but what else, I guess, is there that you need to ask him about that I haven't already heard?
Your Honor, part of the elements of tortious interference is whether he willfully and intentionally interfered with this contract. And if he had a good faith belief that they were not competing or in the same business, that is directly relevant to the elements of their cause.
Yes, but that's relevant to the cause of action that they've alleged that he did that in 2019 and 2020, not that he did it in 2017 or 18. So I guess that's why I'm saying, what's the time frame that we're really talking about? And if you can narrow it to the time frame that is alleged, which I think is, if Ms. Burgess can correct me if I'm wrong, but at least I have understood her argument to be that the tortious interference began on or about February of 2019. So if he was going around to investors, in 2018, I don't know how relevant that is, but what was he doing in 2019? I think is fair game, since they have alleged that in 2019 he did something to interfere.
But Your Honor, what I'm talking about is what he believed in 2014 when he was making pitches to investors, 2015, what business he believed they were in, because that directly bears on this PIA, and his good faith belief that they were not violating it when he hired Mr. Saylor in 2019. Because in order for him to interfere in this contract, he has to, I mean, his understanding of this contract at the time it was entered into in 2014, when he was running around the country raising tens of millions of dollars, was important. It goes to understand.
I'm sorry, that timing is wrong.
He's not finished. Ms.
Oh, I'm
Dickey has the floor.
It goes to his understanding that PIA was entered into in 2014. He was raising money, making pitches during that period of time, and he was telling his investors, including board members of the current Flow leadership, he was going with them, he was telling investors, he was making his pitch based on what their business was. Now they are saying that he interfered with a contract and that he did that willfully and intentionally. If he did not believe, based on the business model and what they were doing at the time, that they were in the business that he is now in, if he believes sports video industry means getting live rights and producing live events, and that that's the basis of his pitch, then this is directly relevant to the key element in this case.
But let me make sure I understand that I'm thinking of this in terms of sort of 3 time periods, right? When Mr. Floriani was at Flow Sports, after he left Flow Sports, and before Mr. Saylor left Flow Sports, and after Mr. Saylor left Flow Sports. So I guess my question is, what is the time frame of the question you want to ask him about? While he was at Flow, after he left Flow, before Mr. Saylor left Flow, or after Mr. Saylor left Flow? Where is the question directed?
While he was at Flow, when the PIIA goes into effect, we want, and he signed it on behalf of Flow Sports as the CEO. This is directly relevant.
I'm just asking about the time frame at the moment. So the question you want to ask about is what he as CEO and Flow as an entity were telling Flow's investors during that period of time.
Exactly.
All right, Mr. Soltero?
Yeah, sure. I would just add that, and that's inconsistent with positions they're taking in this case, and that's also why it's relevant. That's it.
Ms. Burgess?
The Series B and Series C that he's talking about are 2016 and 2018. They're not at the time of the PIIA, number one. Number two, the decks that have been produced about this, the slide decks, are AEO and can't be discussed on YouTube. Number three, the document itself speaks for itself, prohibits competing, prohibits charging people for competitive content, which is what's happening at Rockfin. His subjective intent about this doesn't make sense, but also that, I'm sorry, what are you saying? Hang on just a moment. What are you saying? And the industry has changed a lot in 4 years.
Your Honor, we play.
Hang on. Anything else, Ms. Burgess?
That's it.
All right, the relevance objection is overruled. You may proceed.
Okay, I'm not even sure where we were. So I am sure that Ms. Burgess will hold me up if I stray off the path.
No more sidebar comments, counsel, please. Just ask a question.
Mr. Floriani, were you involved in fundraising for Flow Sports from its inception?
Yes.
And did you go and talk to potential investors as part of that process?
Yes, I was actively involved in that.
Why was it important for you to have clear in your mind and make clear to potential investors who your competitors were when you were doing that fundraising?
You have to have a really very clear competitive landscape just because it shows clarity in your industry and in your business model and what you're focused on. If you say everything is a competitor, then really you're focused on nothing. You really have to understand where the opportunity costs are in the industry and what's going to move the needle for your business or not. So to have a very tailored and appropriate size competitive landscape is important, and that's what we did in our certainly in our Series B investment.
So what was your understanding during this time period of 2014 as to what sports video meant and what business you were in, and what were you telling the investors?
Objection, compound, calls for a legal conclusion, and parole evidence.
Overruled, all objections. You may answer the question.
So we did our Series A in 2014 and did our Series B in 2016. In 2014, it was very clear that sports video industry was really focused in on protecting our competitive advantage, which was our cost structure of a reduced cost structure of going out and getting live events that TV couldn't get. So Fox Sports and NBC Sports, they couldn't get those live events. And so we would get those live events and be able to monetize them because our cost structure was so much lower. As time went on, we did pull more feeds, and we thought our competitive landscape. So I mean, we went probably, like I said, visited 100 different VCs and gave our pitch 100 times. Pat Noonan and myself, we could recite the pitch backwards and forward. We knew when each person was going to talk. It was very, very fluid by the time we were done. And every time a VC would ask us, who are your competitors? Because they ask always, they want to know who your competitors. We would always say anyone who competes and bids after live sport event rights. And that was a really very tailored and focused response, but yet put us in a massive industry. And so that's what we consider to be anyone who is competing after live event rights is what would be our competition. You're on mute. I can't hear you, Ms. Burgess.
And do you do that at Rockfin?
No.
Are you in that business at Rockfin?
Nope.
What kind of content were you discussing with USA Wrestling?
So USA Wrestling has a YouTube channel. And so, I always, one of our competitors is YouTube. Patreon and Substack, I would say, are our big three competitors. And so I talked to USA Wrestling about a possibility of moving parts of their YouTube channel over to Flow Sports and seeing how that would go.
And are you discussing having rights to the USA Wrestling events?
Objection leading.
Same.
What kind of an agreement are you trying to work out with USA Wrestling when you're talking to them?
Well, I don't know if I was trying to work out a specific agreement. I mean, maybe there was agreement, or maybe it was over a year ago that we were in discussion. We talked with them or broached the subject with them. But the main idea was, hey, you're monetizing content on YouTube. Maybe there's a better way to do that, right? I mean, ultimately, our monetization method has to be probably, I would argue, a whole order of magnitude better than YouTube for us to be successful, and I think it is. And so I was broaching the subject with USA Wrestling to see if they would do that.
Do they have a channel on Rockfin?
No.
Okay, pass the witness.
Your Honor, I have about 5 minutes of questioning, but they relate to damages issues. So I didn't know if I should do that now or wait and briefly call Mr. Floriani back at some other time.
Yeah, he's got to be here. I say we call him back later. It's not like he's going anywhere.
Understood, Your Honor. Then in that case, I have no questions at this time.
Let's do it later when it's in context with all the rest of that, because I feel like I want to keep to our agreement about how we're going to compartmentalize the issues.
Totally understand. No questions at this time.
Does that mean you don't have any more questions? Sounds like he's passing. So,
Yep, I'm
Ms.
passing.
Yes. So, Mr. Floriani, one of the things that is different about Flow Sports and YouTube is, one of the things that's different about Rockfin is that you can be ungiven your publishing rights, right?
Different than who? YouTube?
Right. I mean, you only have 120 content providers, correct?
Only? There's over 100 content channels on Rockfin. Yeah.
And YouTube doesn't ungive you your publishing rights because you don't produce enough, do they?
Yeah, they absolutely do. They revoke publishing rights all the time.
For not producing enough?
Well, you have to apply to be a monetized channel, and I think there's certain requirements you have to meet within a threshold, and if you don't execute enough, you can fall below the monetization of a channel, as I understand it.
Well, certainly on Rockfin, we know that you can lose your publishing rights just for not publishing enough, right?
I think that's I think that's not really accurate, Ms. Burgess.
Well, and because you want the user to go to a site and see something active, right?
No, I would characterize it like this. If someone created a channel on Rockfin, especially in our early days, right, where we're trying to make sure everything is buttoned up for people. If someone created a channel on Rockfin and they did not do any content, and they didn't do it for months, we said, okay, well, let's get this channel out of here. They don't want to be here. That's fine. I mean, it wasn't like, hey, we went in and took some draconian
I'm going to object to further as non-responsive.
Sustained. You may ask him a new question.
Sure, let's go, Mr. Weisbrot, to F002. We talked about your you not having wrestling content in your early business model, right?
Yeah, we didn't have any content in our early business, wrestling content in our launch.
But here in February of 2019, you tell Mr. Saylor that you'd really like to work with him again, correct?
I object. This is repetitive. We've gone over this several times.
Sustained.
And you tell him that you need him 4 times in the first paragraph, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
Now, let's go to page 2, the headhunting. Okay, so there are 81, is this the one with the 81 or is the next one? Hold on just a moment. Let's go to, oh, down further. Is it down even to the next page? Oh, here we go. Yes, thank you. So you, at the time, in February of 2019, you had 81 people in the wrestling community that you were still planning to talk to, right?
This is me just exploring wrestling, and I was saying just generally
Objection,
there's a lot of.
non-responsive.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And just to answer the specific question, is she correct in the way that she described that? But I'll ask her to ask you again so you're clear about her question.
In February of 2019, you were planning to contact 81 people in the wrestling community, right?
Yeah, that's what it says.
And you knew that Mr. Saylor had a better relationship with about half of them, right?
Yep.
Okay, you can take that down. Isn't it true that Rockfin did not even register for the DCMA until after Flow Sports brought it up in court in this case?
That's relevant.
Sustained.
Now, let's talk about these documents you brought up. I think one was D156 and another was D159. Both of these predate, I believe both of these predate the September press release where you announced PA Power Wrestling coming on to Rockfin, correct?
I'm at 56. I have in front of me. So you're saying, does this predate that it could have? I don't know specifically, Ms. Burgess.
Do you recall that F007 is from September of
Oh,
2019?
I see it says August 2019. I didn't see. Yes, this is before the PA Power press release.
And under leadership, you specifically mention again that you're rounded out by other former Flow Sports executives, correct?
Yeah, it says Flow Sports executives, recent Penn engineering graduates, and a high stakes for Shark.
Now,
High stakes, what was the word before short?
Poker Shark.
Thank you.
now you also referred to 159, which is in the same time frame, right? It's a slide about competition with Rockfin.
Yes. Was that
And
in?
And you only named 4 competitors, right?
Yes.
Okay, and you testified that the reason you didn't list Flow Sports was because you didn't think they were competitive, right?
Yeah, they're not competitive.
And when you left Flow Sports in May of 2018, you had been paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to re-up your non-compete for a year after your service, right?
Your Honor, relevance.
Sustained.
Well, Judge, it goes to the reason that the true reason why he didn't include them as a competitor. It shows his credibility and bias.
Objection, Your Honor, if we're going to go into his
We
other,
are not going to go into the renegotiation of any agreement unless it has to do in the agreement with whether or not this is the reason or the motivation. I mean, I'm not going to
Well,
litigate
Judge,
that other case. I'm not litigating some other case.
I
I'm only
understand that,
litigating
but
this one. right?
If I could just say
Sure,
why it's
sure.
relevant. Sure, no one would list Flow Sports as a competitor when it would outright breach their current agreement, right? You wouldn't put Flow Sports on this deck if it was going to show that you were breaching an agreement for which you had been paid hundreds of
But now,
thousands of dollars.
now you want us to litigate whether or not what he was doing at that time violated that agreement? We're not litigating that
not
case.
at all.
That's my point. That's the only place this leads, right?
No, it leads to why he didn't put it on the sheet of paper in a public.
No, it leads to some speculation about why he did what he did. It does not tell us that he was doing something that violated another agreement that's not the subject of this case. I don't think so.
All right, I'll proceed. May I proceed, Judge?
Please.
Now, Mr. Floriani, you testified that you did a lot of research over months to develop the cryptocurrency idea for Rockfin, right?
Yes,
And you started that research while you were the CEO of Flow Sports, right?
totally false.
You met with people about it at Flow Sports, right?
Objection relevance, Your Honor.
Well, he's already talked about looking into some things. I just don't understand beyond what specific research. I don't understand what this has to do with this lawsuit.
Well, it's because Mr.
Beyond what he's already
Floriani,
told us about what he was doing to start up the new venture. I'm just not sure I understand where he
Well,
did.
I don't know. It appears that they're arguing that a reason that Rockfin is not competitive is because they use a different way to pay their content providers. And so if so, then the fact that he suggested that to enhance the experience at Flow Sports shows that it totally could have been done by Flow Sports as well.
We're not arguing that, Your Honor.
That's not in dispute. It could have been done by them then. It could be done by them now. So what? What's
It's just not a differentiator for, okay, great. Now, Mr. Floriani, in your model, is the Nittany Lions Wrestling Club a content creator?
I would consider them a media company, content creator, a little mini media company right now.
And they earn Ray tokens for distributing their live events through your live streaming player, right?
They earn Ray tokens for a multitude of reasons. The way a channel earns Ray tokens on the Ray ecosystem.
Object to further as
sustained.
Thank you. And the difference is that you think that's just a better way for content creators to earn money, right? You think it's a better mousetrap that you've built at Rockfin.
I object to that as vague and compound.
I don't know what kind of mousetrap has to do. I'm gonna sustain the vague objection. Don't know what
Okay.
that means.
You think, although Nittany Lions could have distributed this live event on Flow Sports, that it's better for them to distribute it on Rockfin, right?
He answered Your Honor objection.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the objection. I didn't hear what you said, Miss Dickey. The volume was not
Sorry, objection asked and answered.
overruled. You can answer that question.
What's the question?
Sure. Nittany Lions could have aired its live stream on Flow Sports, but you think it was a better option for them to do it on Rockfin, correct?
No. I mean, the thought behind, it really is to what they want to do, how they want to go about it. So if they, they
Objection
have,
unresponsive.
No, you asked him the question, so he gets to answer it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
if, one experience might say, hey, distributing their,
Mr. Floriani, to the extent that you can, and I have some doubt about whether or not you can answer it if it calls for some motivation on the part of the wrestling club as opposed to from your perspective. So in fairness to you and in keeping with my own thinking about this, I'm going to ask Ms. Burgess to clarify from whose perspective she's asking the question. That's one of the reasons why I overruled the objection. I thought the question was in the nature of whether or not Rockfin was going to benefit in some way as opposed to what the motivation was for Nittany Lions Wrestling Club to choose one entity to work with over a different entity to work with. He can't know that. That's a question only for Nittany Lion Wrestling Club. But if your question, which is where I thought you were headed, was, did it benefit Rockfin in some way? I thought that's where you were headed. So I'm going to ask you to clarify your question.
Certainly, Judge. Mr. Floriani, it's true that Rockfin profits off the fact that Nittany Lions is streaming its event there, correct?
When they provide value, which they have, we do benefit.
And you promote yourself to content providers like Nittany Lions by saying that you're a preferred way to distribute, right?
We market ourselves by saying we are a better way for media companies and channels to monetize their content.
And in fact, you testified that that when Nittany Lions started its channel in September of 2020, it started its, I think you said, its own little media company that would be competing with Flow Sports, right?
Yeah, I would say that that's who your competitor is, NLWC, if you want to have a competitor.
And Matt Scouts is competing for subscribers on Rockfin right now, correct?
Yeah, but they're not doing live events, Ms. Burgess.
Well, Mr. Saylor did content at Flow Sports and he does content on Matt Scouts, and people buy that for $9.99 a month on Matt Scouts, correct? On Rockfin, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the distinguishing difference is he was creating content to promote live events. He's right now just doing content for the sake of content.
Including content about live events like the Nittany Lions Wrestling Club event, correct?
And Flow Sports events, yes.
Okay, let's pull up F89. Okay, do you recall this tweet?
Yeah.
Oh, have we admitted this? I move for admission of F89.
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection. Wait, it's hearsay, Your Honor. Objection.
It appears to be conversations about people who are not parties to the litigation. So
Well,
the hearsay objection is sustained.
Okay, you can take it down. Mr. Floriani, isn't it true that Cale Sanderson called you about the fact that he was upset that other Rockfin channels were making money off his event?
Objection relevance.
Dang.
He called me.
No, she's gonna ask you another question.
So even the channels on Rockfin are competing with each other for subscribers, right?
I wouldn't characterize it like that.
Well, you changed your terms of service after Mr. Sanderson complained to you, correct?
I believe there was a tweak in their terms of service.
In order to share attribution among channels, right?
Objection relevance, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Let's go to 992. Okay, is this what is this? Can you identify it?
It looks like a Twitter ad for Rockfin. I don't see the date, so I don't know when it was.
Okay, and is this already in evidence, Ms. Galavis? I move for admission of 992. Oh, it's agreed.
No objection.
Okay, and
Wait, hang on. Ms. Dickey, I didn't hear from you.
Sorry, no objection.
Not plaintiff's exhibit 992 is admitted. You guys
Okay.
have to give me a minute to confirm the list you sent me among 6,000 other pages you sent me after we started the trial. I need a minute to look at your pages. I need a minute to confirm agreements. I need a minute to get it admitted so the record is clear and the court reporter has it down. So please pause to give us time to take care of these administrative tasks, please. All right, Ms. Burgess, you have the floor.
Yes, Mr. Floriani, it's true that subscribers can experience exclusive video, podcast, live stream, and ranking content on the go with the Rockfin app, correct?
Yes, just like YouTube or any other platform app.
And that's true for Flow Sports too. Subscribers can experience exclusive video, podcast, live stream, and ranking content on the go with Flow Sports, correct?
Objection, Foundation.
Dane?
I passed the witness.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Nothing, Your Honor.
All right, subject to Mr. Floriani's testimony on other matters. Just to remind you, sir, that the rule that was invoked earlier still applies, which means aside from talking to the lawyers, really can't talk to anybody else about your testimony or theirs. We will move now to Ms. Burgess's next witness, or is he your last witness? Or you have another witness?
No, we have, we're calling Pat Noonan. He's in the waiting room.
Is that the same as Lawrence Noonan?
Yes, sorry. He goes by Pat.
Mr. Noonan, if you would unmute your microphone, please, and raise your right hand, I will swear you in. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you will give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
If you would please state your name for the record and spell both your first and last name, because it looks like your first name is spelled a little differently.
It's Lawrence Patrick Noonan. That's LAURENCEPATRICKNOONAN.
Thank you, sir. You can put your hand down, and Ms. Burgess, you may proceed.
Yes, Mr. Noonan, could you briefly introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Pat Noonan, and I am CFO of Flow Sports.
And how long have you been there?
A little over 5 years.
And what are your responsibilities as CFO?
I oversee all of the finance, accounting, and data infrastructure at Flow Sports, and then I'm primarily responsible for investor relations.
Okay, does that mean that you go to investor pitches and help with the decks and so forth?
Yes, that's correct.
Who do you report to?
Our CEO, Mark Floriani.
Without getting into any specifics in terms of numbers or calculations, could you tell us what a lifetime value is?
Yes, so it is a calculation that's done to predict the net profit from a customer over the lifetime that they are with their subscription with a company like Flow Sports.
Okay, and there are a few things that we need to go. I'm going to ask you a question about funding rounds, and then we'll need to go into the AEO room or into the other courtroom for a little bit. But Mr. Noonan, did you travel around the country for some of the investment series here?
Yes.
And what years did you do that?
So we raised our Series B in August of 2016. So it was pretty much January through May of 2016. And then we raised a Series C in late May, early June of 2019. And so we did all the fundraising pitches from January through April of 2019.
And how did you describe the components of Flow Sports business model to potential investors at that time?
At which time?
Sorry.
During the investor rounds.
So during Series B and Series C.
I'm sorry, is Mr. Burdico taking this one? Because I feel like I'm hearing him, but I don't see him. There he is. Okay.
I am, Your Honor.
Taking this one. I'm sorry, let me just move you up a bit on my screen because I'm having a little trouble hearing you again. So if you could turn up the volume on your device like you did the other day, that would really be helpful. And I thought I heard you lodge an objection after I asked for a time frame. What's your objection, if any?
It was
Or
going
would
to be compound, Your Honor, because he identified two series.
Okay, I think the timeframes were different, and that was one of the reasons I asked the similar question. So Ms. Burgess, if you could just clarify your question, what you're asking him about and when, that'd be helpful.
Sure. Let's just start with 2016. Well, actually, Mr. Noonan, did you describe your business model the same in 2016 and 2018?
Yes.
Okay. And how did you describe it?
The phrase that we use is we are a subscription-based direct-to-consumer sports media company. So that's the short description. There's a much longer one I can get to.
Did you describe what you provided to those consumers?
Yes. So there's like 4 pillars and 4 or 5 pillars. Let me just make sure I get this right. So we've got media rights, so live events that we cover. We do content marketing, storytelling. We've got, and around that, you've got stats, rankings, player profiles, news, stuff like that. We've got production capabilities where we can actually go produce events ourselves if we need to. And then the last piece is software, where we will produce some technology in the absence of its existence in order to enhance the sports media experience.
Where was Willie Saylor in those pillars?
He worked under the wrestling vertical, and then was, we did a few reorgs over the years and was eventually in the content division.
Okay, and so out of those 4 pillars, which one would it fall under?
It would be the marketing and content and storytelling, the non-live.
What does Flow Sports mean when it says content and storytelling?
So we kind of view the world a couple different ways in terms of how all-encompassing our product is. So there's live events and live media rights, so the live broadcast of the sports event. And then the other part of the product that's just as important is the storytelling, the awareness, the context building around the events and the athletes, and all the key sort of stakeholders that make a sport a sport. And sorry, I'll pause there. Does that answer your question?
It does. And when you talked about your competitors in 2016 and 2018, were they also the same during that time period?
There's the leading.
Same.
I'm sorry,
yeah.
you can't
I'm gonna ask
answer.
you another question. She's gonna.
Okay. Who were your competitors in 2016?
So we're in 25 plus sports, and so competition can come in many different shapes or sizes. But essentially, anyone who has sports media content behind a paywall is a potential competitor, or was a potential competitor, or always has been. And that could be live content, that could be non-live content, that could be all sorts of things.
Does that include Rockfin?
Yes, that would include Rockfin.
And has your definition of a competitor changed over time?
No.
Okay. I have a few questions for him in the AEO room. And since he is actually traveling with his parents on the East Coast and has to be quarantined and whatnot, do you mind, Judge, if we do that right now?
On something other than damages, you mean?
Yes. Well,
I understand
does-
you want to go into the closed courtroom. I understand that, but I'm not sure I understand if it has to do with the damages issue that we're not doing today or some other issue. I'm just trying to get clarification about that.
right. It's about damages. We can recall him if Mr. Noonan can be available again.
There's some other information that we can talk to Mr. Is he going to testify about other than damages?
No, just what we've talked about plus damages. That's right.
Oh, well, we aren't, I thought we agreed we weren't, whatever, he's here now, so let's, no, that's okay. We are not doing that today, so we'll see if anybody has any other questions for him other than on that issue. And I'm sorry, Mr. Noonan, we have had some back and forth about scheduling, and we've kind of, through no one's fault really, we just have had some scheduling issues to deal with. And so I apologize, but we may need you to be available another time to talk about some issues that we're not taking up today. I hope that's not too inconvenient.
That's okay. I think I heard that would be next Thursday or Friday. Is that right?
Probably.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's
I don't
fine, as long
know
as it's not Monday.
whether that would be Thursday or Friday, but it won't be before Thursday.
Okay, that's, I'll make that work.
Okay, perfect. All right, then do you pass him for now?
Yes, Your Honor, subject to that. We just wanted to make sure that he talked about the investor presentation.
Okay.
Since that came in just a minute ago.
Okay, very good. No problem. Mr. Brutico.
Thank you. Mr. Noonan, isn't it true that Flow Sports' core business is live event streaming?
Yes, that's part of what we do, and yes, that is part of a very strong part of what we do.
But it is your core business, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you also would agree with me that live event and video event coverage is what you would characterize as Flow Sports' primary offering, wouldn't you?
It's kind of hard to strip it all out because like you can't have one without the other. It's kind of like a chicken and egg. But for instance, if you didn't have a live event, you wouldn't have anything to cover that's non-live. You see what I'm saying?
Objection, non-responsive. I believe it's a yes or no question. Live event and video event coverage is Flow Sports' primary offering, true or false?
Wait,
True.
I'm going to ask
We-
that,
can
I'm
we
going to ask
do
it to not be a deposition, and that when there's an objection non-responsive, that we wait for a judge ruling on that.
Excellent idea. I like being able to rule. What's the answer to the question he's just asked? Is it
True.
correct or not correct?
It's true. Yeah, that's fine. True.
And that is true in 2016 as well as today, correct?
Yep.
Now, of course, you testified about going on the road for both Series B and Series C, correct?
Yes.
Okay. When you would go on those road shows and talk to investors, you testified that you talked about your competitors, right?
Yes.
And you describe your competitors not just by name, but also by the type of company who were your competitors, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
And when
I'm
you,
sorry, could you,
Yes.
that'd be helpful. Thank you. It's sometimes difficult to distinguish between the and the
Yes. I'll say yes or no. Yeah.
Easier for me to understand. Thank you.
you do this pitch hundreds of times in the Series B, didn't you?
Yes.
And like you said, you and Mr. Floriani knew the deck going backwards and forwards, correct?
That is correct.
And when an investor asked, who is your competition, who answered between you and Mr. Floriani?
Usually I did this slide. It was different in some meetings, but generally I talked about competition.
Okay. And your answer was, it was anyone who competes for live sports events, correct?
So yes, although
All right,
I mean,
this is improper impeachment. If you
Not
say your
impeachment.
answer was,
It's not impeachment at all. It's just asking him the question. Right? What did you say when you were making the pitches? Did I understand the question correctly?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead. You can answer that question, sir.
yes, I mean, we absolutely talked about other folks with live rights, but those weren't like the only competitors in the complete competitive set.
Okay. My question was, isn't it true that that's what you answered to investors in those pitch sessions?
I'm sorry, that asked and answered?
He hasn't answered it yet, but he did ask the question. So do you understand his question? He's not
Right,
asking
yeah,
whether or
maybe
not
just ask the
the
question, Scott, just maybe ask the question again, sorry.
Yeah, so let me clarify for you. He's not asking you about the universe of your opinion on this subject of competition. That's not his question. His question is limited and specific to what you said during these pitch meetings to investors. That's what he's asking.
Yes, that's fair. Yeah, yes.
So that's the question. What did you say to them? And I'm sorry, I don't know that I understood your answer.
I'll just ask the question again, Your Honor. When you were asked by prospective investors in the Series B, you stated that Flow Sports competitors were those who competed with Flow Sports for live rights, correct?
Correct.
Right. And you testified earlier that you said the same thing in Series C, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, isn't it true that you and you are unwilling to limit Flow Sports competitors to those in sports?
We talked about in the deposition. Yes, it's any kind of live competition or competition that we can cover. So, and we talked about a cappella singing being one type of vertical that we cover.
Right, and so you would believe that another provider of a cappella events would be a competitor of Flow Sports, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you would consider anyone who does live events in politics as a potential competitor too, wouldn't you?
Potentially, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, okay, great. You all would also agree with me that the live streaming sports event market has become more competitive since 2016, wouldn't you?
Yes, I would say so, yeah.
And Flow Sports has adapted to that by ramping up your rights acquisition department, correct?
That's yes, that's true.
Right, and it's also pretty much the only thing that you've done in response to that competitive threat, isn't that right?
No, that's not correct.
Okay, I'd like to read from your deposition, page 188, line 24 to 189.9. Mr. Wisrock, can I have that, please? May I read, Your Honor? You're on mute, Your Honor.
Thank you. I was actually just going to let Mr. Noonan have a chance to look it over first, and we'll see if that refreshes his memory.
Yeah, I believe I remember this. I don't know if I'm looking at what Scott was referring to though.
I don't see the
This is just a
answer.
question,
Excuse
right?
me, I don't see the answer in the part that is highlighted. Perhaps we could get the question and the answer so that we're all on the same page.
Mr. Wisrock, can you help us with showing the court the next page to line 9?
Judge, I don't see anything different than what he just said.
Well, I do.
I do, and I think it's for the court to decide.
Oh, I so appreciate all the editorials, but I'm going to ask you all nice lawyers to stop doing that, please. I feel like I have said that 100 times over the last week. Stop doing it, please. You may first ask Mr. Noonan to take a look at it and see if he sees anything that might be different. So the point that is being made here, Mr. Noonan, is that Mr. Brunekow thinks that the answer you just gave a few minutes ago is different from what you said at your deposition, and that's why he's bringing up your deposition. I want you to have an opportunity to look at it first so that you know what his suggestion is about what he thinks is different about your testimony. And so first take a look at it. Let me know if you stand by the answer you gave in court just a minute ago, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, I've reviewed it.
All right. Now, Mr. Brunekow?
May I read it, Your Honor?
Yes.
Starting at line 24. I'm not going to get into all that again, but it was my impression that the live streaming sports market has become much more competitive since 2016. Would you agree with that? Answer, yes. Question, and how has Flow Sports been able to try to keep its marketplace in that more competitive environment? Answer, we've ramped up our rights acquisition. Question, anything else? Answer, no, that's the major activity. Thank you, Your Honor.
I'm sorry, this time the question was different because the question here is about the
It's about live streaming. It's about live streaming.
Your Honor, I don't think that that's an appropriate time for counsel to interpose an objection like that.
Excuse me. Excuse me, please. She may object. I just didn't hear the word objection. And so if you have one, state it, please.
Objection, improper impeachment. The question didn't reference live streaming. This referenced live streaming. And so he said, with regard to live streaming, we ramped up our rights acquisition in live streaming.
I appreciate the objection. It's overruled. Move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Pass the witness.
Good afternoon, Mr. Noonan.
Good afternoon.
It's true that you don't consider Roku a competitor, correct?
We covered that in the deposition where I said I wasn't as clear with their efforts on putting other content behind a paywall. On the platform side, I said they're not, but I don't know if they have other sports related or competition related content behind a paywall. I just don't know the answer to that.
Have you ever said that Flow Sports' secret sauce is the ability to cover an event at an average that doesn't allow ESPN or Fox to cover live events with the same or similar structure?
Yes, I have said that.
And that's true.
Generally, yes.
Okay. I'd like to offer, Defendant's Exhibit 3 into evidence, but not show it on the screen.
I'm sorry, we have to check for what that is. Hold on. Objection relevance. It's an email from 2016.
Your Honor, it goes to define.
Excuse me, is it related to the pitches for Series B or C?
It's regarding the competitive landscape in 2016, Your Honor.
Does it refer specifically to the pitches in Series B or C? Does anyone know?
Your Honor, this would relate to the Series B.
Okay. All right. The objection to relevance is overruled. Defendant's Exhibit number 3 is admitted.
And in connection with the pitch decks that y'all have produced, you'd agree with me that the identified competitors are what we would call the broadcasters. Wouldn't you agree?
Sorry, can you just restate that question? I just want to be crystal clear what you're asking.
Sure. In the pitch decks where you show who your competitors are, broadcasters are the ones that predominate.
Yes.
Okay. Followers and subscribers are different, right?
Yes.
And you don't charge for followers like on social media or anything like that, correct?
No.
That's not correct?
So we do not charge for followers. Sorry, so that is correct, sorry.
Perfect. And obviously, because of COVID, there have been virtually no live events since March of 2020, correct?
Not virtually no events, but a significantly reduced number.
Okay. And I think we're going to talk
on the impact of COVID, we have AEO information on that. That's part of the damages section. So I'm just objecting to getting into anything about the financials around that without being an AEO.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Sotero.
Your Honor, I was wanting to stop right there because I wanted to continue the damages at the damages phase. So I was going to pass the witness.
Anything else?
Yes, Mr. Noonan, has Flow Sports also continued to work? You saw that you were asked about live streaming and rights acquisition.
Yep.
What has Flow Sports done to remain competitive on the content side?
Yeah. So COVID presented some unprecedented challenges, and we had to really think about survival mode. And my finance team and I created probably 50 different scenario models to understand what could happen.
Oh wait, don't talk about that. That's not what I'm asking about. I don't want you to go into that right now. We're going to talk about that later. I'm taking you back to the beginning of your other testimony when you were talking about the pitch decks, okay?
Oh, right. So what, yeah,
okay. So what over time has Flow Sports done to improve its position in content?
Got it. Okay. Sorry, I misunderstood the question. So again, we see the world in a couple different ways. in terms of how we approach the market with our product. And so one is the live events, obviously. But the second and critical part.
Non-responsive.
Sustained. I'm not sure I'm following this question and answer. So I'm going to ask Ms. Burgess to try to clarify for all of us and for you exactly what she's asking about, and perhaps a time frame might help focus what she's asking about. Ms. Burgess?
During Series B, did you talk to investors about content?
Yes.
And what did you tell them?
Well, you know, specifically like what is our product set beyond live events. So we've got stats, rankings, news, which is 24/7 coverage. We've got documentaries, what we call float films, and then podcasts and studio shows. I mean, a whole smattering of different types of content that would support a specific vertical.
And do you get subscribers off of that content?
Objection leading.
Yes.
Was Mr. Saylor paid based on subscribers to his content?
Objection leading.
Sustained.
If
Can I
Mr.
answer that, or-
Weisrod, if you could pull up, no, don't answer. Mr. Weisrod, if you could pull up 992. Mr. Noonan, can you read the top of that to yourself?
Experience, oh, to myself. Yep.
Okay, isn't it, well, let me ask you a question. Can Flow Sports, do Flow Sports subscribers get these same items?
Yes.
Objection leading.
Sorry, I can't hear you, Mr. Burdico.
Objection leading.
All right, please don't lead the witness. But I'm really having a hard time hearing you, sir. So if you could get a little closer to your microphone. Ms. Burgess?
Sure. You sustained an objection to Mr. Floriani testifying about this as to Flow Sports. So, Mr. Noonan, I'm asking you, does Flow Sports offer all these same things that Rockfin is offering here?
Objection leading.
The objection, I don't understand what you said about some other objection. The objection here, as I understand it from Ms. Burdico now, is leading. So you can ask him about this exhibit. It's in evidence, right?
Right.
What is the question you want to ask him about it?
Does Flow Sports offer exclusive video?
Yes.
Does Flow Sports offer podcasts?
Yes. Yes.
Does Flow Sports offer live stream?
Yes.
Does Flow Sports offer rankings?
Yes.
Content?
Yes.
And do they have an app?
Yes.
Okay, I pass the witness.
Mr. Noonan, does Roku offer exclusive video?
I don't know the answer to that.
Does Roku offer podcasts?
I think so. I don't know. I'm not as familiar with Roku's product set, to be honest.
Does Roku offer live stream?
Objection, Foundation.
I think they have channels that do. I don't know.
Hang on. He's going to ask you another question. I've sustained an objection to that one.
Okay. Are you familiar with Apple TV?
Yes.
You familiar with whether Apple TV offers exclusive video?
Yes.
Are you familiar with whether Apple TV offers podcasts?
I don't know if they do.
Are you familiar with whether Apple TV offers live streaming?
I believe they do.
Thank you. No further questions.
Very, very briefly, is your content team in 2020 as good as it's ever been?
Define good.
I don't know. You tell me, is your content team in 2020 good? Is it as good as it was in 2018?
I don't know how to answer that.
Okay. Do you have any answer as to whether your content team in wrestling is as good in 2020 as it was in, let's say, 2019?
I don't know how to answer what's good. That's very subjective. What is it? They're more effective at getting more likes or tweets, or are they getting more subscribers? Like, what does good mean?
By any standard that Flow Sports uses, is the 2020 content team as good as 2019 or 2018? Yes or no?
I'd say they're extremely capable.
Objection vague. The witness is having a hard time with this question.
It's in the question is about his own opinion. He gets to define the word good. It's just a question about his opinion. That's all. She's just asking you about your opinion. We're not defining the word good in any way other than what you think about that.
Okay. I think they're all extremely capable folks.
Okay. I'll pass the witness.
May I go ask one more question, Judge? Mr. Noonan, does Flow Sports consider Apple TV to be a competitor?
Again, we talked about this before. Any company that puts content behind a paywall that is sports related could potentially be a competitor to Flow Sports. So if Apple TV is doing that, then yes.
Okay, she's asking specifically if you consider them. That's your opinion, what you know, not what you think about what other people think about this. Just you, Mr. Noonan. Do you?
Yes.
think Apple
Yes, I
is-
do. Yes, I do.
Any other questions?
Yes. Yes, Your Honor. I'm sorry.
Hang on. Mr. Vertigo, any other questions?
I just wanted to be clear because of the technology. You testified that you consider Apple TV to be a competitor, yes?
The question I was just asked, I said yes.
The question was, do you consider Apple TV to be a competitor, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
And do you consider the Longhorn Network to be competitive?
Potentially, if for our Flow football.
Do you consider the University of North Carolina to be competitive?
I'm sorry, objection
Potentially
vague. What
for
part of
certain
the
kids,
university?
I don't know. Yeah.
If you don't know the answer, it's okay. It's just whether or not you consider the university to be a competitor in your business. You do or you don't know. Either fine.
I don't know about UNC.
Okay. Would you consider if they were engaged in sporting events in your verticals, would you consider that department to be competitive?
Objection vague. It doesn't tell us whether they're
Overruled. If you don't know, it's okay. There's no
So,
wrong answer.
Carlos, repeat the question.
Sure. If North Carolina, like the University of Texas or some other university, were to have any kind of content pertaining to sports in which you have verticals in, would that be competitive to you, your definition?
Potentially, yes.
Okay. No further questions.
Ms. Burgess, anything else?
no, Your Honor.
Subject to the other testimony he might offer on the other issues that we're not taking up today. Thank you, Mr. Noonan. We may see you, they'll let you know if they need you Thursday or Friday.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Stay safe. All
Thank
right,
you.
I think that's gonna do it for us today. So I will see